away reaping is the legacy of that collapse in exploration. It's only in the last year or two that you're starting to see a rise in exploration. There was a good article in the Times about what's known as drill ships. These are the ships that do offshore exploration, which has increased dramatically. The offshore exploration now accounts for about a third of global oil production. In the previous 6 years, only 8 drill ships came onto the market. This year alone, 16 drill ships are coming onto the market. What it means is finally oil exploration is beginning to ramp up. And I don't want to suggest that's a good thing. But the fact of the matter is that there is a lot of oil out there. There's also the factor of U.S. foreign policy, that in 2003, what's known as the excess global capacity collapsed. And that was because of 2 big factors. Venezuela, we supported the 2002 coup, then we supported the oil sector strike later that year, and their oil industry virtually collapsed, and they're still 1 million barrels below their daily production. And then, of course, we invaded Iraq. So you saw excess global production capacity shrink from 6 million barrels a day to about 3 million barrels a day, and then in 2006 to 1 million barrels a day. And that's how the speculators are able to take advantage of this.
Michael Klare.
Well, I agree that there's been times when the rate of exploration dropped, but with all the money that's being spent on exploration, they're coming up empty, and the few new wells that have come online, like off the shore of Brazil, are going to be far more costly to develop than any in history. And the one big new field that has been discovered, the Kashagan field in the Caspian Sea, has been an unmitigated disaster. So yes, there is more oil in the world, but it's of the tough oil variety, extremely difficult and hazardous to produce. And so my basic thesis that the supply of oil is increasingly inadequate to satisfy the needs of the rising powers and the older powers, I think, is correct. And it's in this environment of tight supplies that any crisis that emerges, the fighting in Nigeria, the fighting in Iraq, the possibility of a hurricane season that's upon us, and the possibility, more than anything else, of a U.S. strike on Iran, which I think is more than 50% likely. That's what's fueling the speculative frenzy that Arun has been speaking about. The speculators believe that more crises, more chaos in the Middle East is likely. That's what's lifting oil prices.
Well, I'd like to ask about that in particular, because obviously you're raising the issue, not just a question of the total supply of oil, but how easy and cheap it is to get to it. But then the other issue is who controls that oil, isn't that? And isn't that the issue here at hand, that there could be a lot of oil in the world, but if the United States or if Europe can't control it, then the question of the price of the supply then is an issue.
Yes, indeed, especially in that the major producing countries in the Middle East and Africa are run by state-owned companies, and I'm sure Arun could say more about this, and they don't have the same incentive that we do to produce, get it out there in the market. They want to keep it producing for as long as possible. That's their only source of wealth. So they want to keep it in the ground for as long as they possibly can, and that's another reason why supplies are not as adequate as they might be.
You talk about the global assault on Africa's vital resources. Lay out the picture of Africa.
Well, Africa is important not because of the magnitude of its supplies, Amy, but because it's the one area in the world that has growth potential. And in a world of shrinking resources, anywhere that has growth potential is going to be a magnet for oil companies and oil consumers. So you have the Europeans going in there. You have the United States flocking to Africa, and now China is going into Africa as well. And because this is an area of instability, all these countries, but especially the U.S. and China, are seeking to secure this oil by also providing arms and military assistance as a way of cementing their ties. So there's an arms race underway in Africa, fueled by this pursuit of energy.
And Arun, I'd like to touch specifically in terms of the role of Russia. Michael talks in his book that it produces enough oil for itself, but it's increasingly seeking to dominate supplies in other parts of the world?
Well, a lot of that has to do with actually its natural gas production. The former Soviet Union, you know, when you include countries like Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, they're actually at a peak. Russia's oil production is looking like it will probably decline a bit, but this has to do with investment. And the important thing is that they're not these absolute natural limits. These have to do with relations of production. And there is a lot of cheap, easy oil out there. We have to remember that. It's locked up in Iran and Iraq because of U.S. foreign policy. And, you know, both these countries could be massive producers. Again, not that that's a good thing, but there is lots of oil out there. And there is also a lot of other countries apart from Africa that can bring a lot of oil online. Canada is developing its tar sands, the Athabasca tar sands in Alberta. They just released a report expecting daily production to increase by 2 million barrels a day. It's god-awful and highly destructive, but they're receiving a tremendous amount of investment. Brazil now projects that they're going to become an oil producer. Angola is increasing its oil production. The Saudis just bought a new field online. They're going to be up to 12.5 million barrels a day and 15 million barrels a day in a few years.
We're going to have to leave it there, but we thank you both very much for being with us. Arun Gupta is an editor at the Indypendent, and Michael Klare's latest book is Rising Power, Shrinking Planet, The New Geopolitics of Energy. That does it for our show. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Shifo Dokadus, Aaron Mate, Angela Kama, Jeffrey Hickman, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar, Hani Masood, Robbie Karen. Happy birthday to John Randolph, and condolences to the Salazar family. Our producer, Nicole Salazar, lost her grandfather this week. I will be in Iowa tonight at Des Moines, 7 o'clock Simpson College, tomorrow morning at the Fairfield Library in Fairfield, Iowa, and on Tuesday night in Aspen at the Ideas Festival at the Hotel Jerome Ballroom. I'm Ingrid Gonzalez. Thanks for joining us.